Bob Pizzini, welcome, my friend.
Marty Strong, thank you so much. Good to see you again.
I don't know how long we've known each other. It seems like forever because we both look ancient. More ancient than you.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, really interesting guy. I think everybody's gonna like hearing about you, and very accomplished. So there's a lot of things to cover. I'm going to get a little bit into the psychology of your background, what kind of makes you who you are, because Instincts is all about figuring out if people believe in or don't believe in gut instinct and the role it plays in making decisions.
For sure.
It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. I just like talking about it. So, naval officer, after doing 10 years is enlisted.
16.
16 is enlisted.
But who's counting?
Bomb disposal tech, EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, in the Navy. Then became an officer, went to the dark side like I did, and finished out as lieutenant commander?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant. All right. So, I guess I don't know who the hell you are. Then he went on to some government contracting for a little while, and then he went to kind of a serial entrepreneur. He went into ownership or partial ownership of the iFly skydiving training and kind of recreational facility up in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Exactly.
But you're also very active in local and state politics in Virginia, and you have your own podcast and called The Bob Pizzini Show.
Right, here another one right here on this network.
That's right. You have another one called Elevate Your Leadership, which is all about leadership, and it kind of follows the theme of an academy, a business academy that you set up, which has a course called Elevate Your Leadership, and it's all derived or shown in your book, Elevate Your Leadership.
There's a theme there.
A little bit. So thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, really it's great to be here. Great to see you again, and congratulations on this next chapter and the things that you've moved on to. It's really totally different from what you were doing in the past, and this is exciting.
You know me, I'm very shy. It's hard to tell stories like this, especially
when we're golfing
on camera. We have something in common when it comes to golf. I put pretty much 10 to 15 golf balls into the woods every time I golf. Bob likes to go into the woods and find the golf balls and bring them back. Not necessarily in that order, but we just have a passion for golf balls in the woods. I don't know why it turns out that way.
You put them in, I bring them out.
So when you were writing this book, you and I were talking about the concept, the structure, and all that, and we were both trainers and instructors in the Navy, so we kind of understood how to put together a course curriculum, syllabus, the point, the end state, put it together in some logical progression. And that part was really nice and smooth. And I remember looking at the first draft, and do you remember what I said?
Yeah, you said something's missing.
Something, what was missing? Bob was missing. He said there's no Bob here. It's all of Bob's brain power and all of his experience and all the successful methods and approaches to leadership that he exercises and teaches other people. There's no Bob. So I said, I think you should write an introductory portion to the book, tell people a little bit about you. And what I tend to do when I start interviewing a guest on Instincts, and it doesn't matter, just tell me that nothing in my childhood had any effect on me whatsoever. That's fine too, because sometimes there's people that will say, hey, look, I had a mentor when I was 23, or I was kind of rambling around, or I thought I had a direction until I met this person or did this job when I was 37. So that's a great answer too. But if, having read the second draft where you put a little bit about your early life in there, tell me a little bit about what things in your childhood, your teen years, etc., prior to going to the Navy, that kind of made you who you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So I will have to say I grew up without a father. First of all, my father died in a car accident when I was 4 years old. And so there was no father figure, male role model, etc. Sports, my coaches kind of filled that gap, if you will. Hockey being my primary sport, but I played every sport there was. I played football and baseball and tennis and basketball all through school. And but at some point, I got interested in scuba diving. And I know you remember this, the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah.
Right. At first, it was in black and white, and then it was in Technicolor. But Jacques Cousteau would take his aquanauts around the world, and I was as a 12-year-old kid, I was fascinated with that, and found
Frenchman or the scuba diver.
So then I found out we had a local scuba diving shop. So I went up to that scuba diving shop, and looked at equipment and what does it take to be a scuba diver. And the guy who owns that shop, his name's Jim Walters, he was sweeping the floor at the time. And I didn't have $40 to pay for the mask. So I asked him if I could sweep the floor, or if I could clean up around there and work for that, my first official piece of diving equipment. And that turned into about a 6-year job.
Wow.
I worked there all through high school. So I knew that I wanted diving to be part of my career as I got older. And then when I was in high school, there was a book on the bookshelf at Tremper High School in Kenosha, Wisconsin called Navy Diver. And it was incredible. It was a lot of the stories of the salvage at Pearl Harbor, but now I wanted to be a Navy diver. And the Navy component is important because also as a teenager, as sophomore, junior, senior in high school, I was losing discipline. I'd stopped playing sports at that point, really because I was working so much, but I needed the discipline that the military delivers, and I knew I needed it, and everything came true. Everything worked out great, and so joined the military, became a Navy diver to start my career.
I mean, we both were divers in the Navy, one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a commercial diver, hard hat diver, second class diver, anything like that. But did you have any idea when you were thinking about this, going to the Navy to be a diver, about the environmental hardship of being a diver, or are you just thinking about the coolness and the technical stuff? I mean, the cold water, the really, really long hours, the heavy gear, all that stuff. And then when you actually are a working diver, it's not like your Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely not a glamorous type of job. The military, I'm not going to say the military makes it glamorous by any means, but when you're on a team that's organized and mission focused and mission driven, there's just a great sense of accomplishment being part of an organization like that. I did a little bit of work in the commercial world when I was still in high school, and that's a rough and tumble place. So the Navy just really gives you that organization, that coordination, that safety factor, and really different than the commercial world.
So, I mean, the story about offering up to sweep and clean the place sounds like you had a pretty good work ethic at that age already. Where did that work ethic come from?
Probably a couple of things. We would shovel snow in the wintertime for money. I would cut lawns in the summertime for money. I guess the work ethic came from, we were middle class, so to speak, in air quotes, growing up. But my mom, now a single mother, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And if I wanted anything, whether it was that dive mask or something else, I had to figure out a way to make it happen. My mother did what she could, and she helped where she could, and she paid for me to go to commercial dive school when I was still in high school. So she was influential in that regard, but if I wanted a car, I had to pay for it. If I was going to pay for a car, I had to have a job and have a work ethic. So, and I was a dishwasher, I was a busboy, I cleaned horse stalls, I cleaned dog kennels, anything I could do. A lot of shit. So anything I could do at that time, I was doing, and it probably developed through sport. I went to Catholic school for 9 years, so there's the guilt that nuns impart upon you during your upbringing. So so all that, and working class family at that point. So it was just kind of the way it was.
So you walk in the Navy, and if you can go back and remember what it was like to walk into that first boot camp company. I mean, my memory is there was about 90 people. I was 17, looked like I was 12, and everybody looked like they were men. I mean, I don't think there was more than 10 other people that looked my age. And back in those days, everybody had their own way of speaking, their own ethnicity, because they didn't have the homogenization we have now with TV and movies and all that.
Yeah.
So if a guy was from Louisiana, he sounded like he was from Louisiana, and he ate Louisiana food and vice versa. Everybody was kind of alien to me, right? And I felt completely kind of lost in that. When you walked into the Navy, were you psychologically prepared, or was it what you expected when you first walked in, very early days? or were you kind of, like I was, a little bit knocked off balance a little bit for a while, or how did that experience?
So off balance is a good way to put it. I was definitely off balance. First time away from mama, so to speak, and my girlfriend at the time, and but also I wanted to be a Navy diver, and back then there was no contract or no guarantee for that type of training. Back then, if you wanted to be a diver, EOD or SEAL, and keep in mind, back then I didn't know what EOD or SEAL was, but if you wanted to be a diver, you had to go to boot camp, and when you were in boot camp, you could take the screening test, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, run, swim, and if you passed the screening test, you could then get orders to Navy dive school. So that was my gamble, if you will, but I wanted it so bad, I was willing to make that gamble. So I took the test. You know how that test goes in boot camp. 30, 40, 50 people show up for the test. The first thing you do is the swim. 3 people are left after the swim.
Yeah.
So I got through the PT test, and they called him a motivator back then, who handles the testing process. The motivator, who was this hardened Vietnam era SEAL, he says, "Congratulations. Go to medical, get your physical exam, and then go to the reclassification office, and let's get you orders to dive school." And I mean, I was 18 years old, and I was so excited. Went to medical, took the eye test, and they said that I was disqualified from diving duty because of my poor vision. And I literally walked out of that medical department with tears in my eyes. It was terrible. And now I'm questioning being in the Navy. The one reason I came in the Navy has just been taken away from me. And they offer reclassification, and because of good ASVAB scores, I had the opportunity to go to advanced electronics schooling, but you can't get out of the contract.
Right.
You're in. So I reclassified into an advanced electronics program. Still not happy about the whole process, and now I'm at Great Lakes going through one of the advanced electronics schools, and I went to medical and I took the eye test again, and lo and behold, up at Great Lakes, they said my eyes were fine to be a Navy diver.
It's a miracle.
Miracle. So without even questioning anything, I just went back to the administrators of the school I was in, and I explained what happened, and now I could go to Navy dive school, and they said, "No, you can't." They said, "You're signed into the 6-year advanced electronics program, and after 6 years you can apply." So I accepted that for a month or two, and then it was really tough for me to just to know now that somebody made a mistake in San Diego in boot camp, and now 6 years of my life are going to be adjusted because of that. Anyway, I failed my next test in the electronics school and got called into the office, and they said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, tough material. And they go, "You don't think that you're going to fail out of here and go to Navy dive school." And I was like, "Roger, got it." And but I was also talking to the detailer, the person who writes your orders to Navy dive school.
Because you were about to qualify for bosun's mate.
That's right. Aboard the USS Always Sail.
Right. Never dock.
The sister ship, the USS Never Dock. So, but anyway, he assured me that if I was released from that electronics program, he would see it, he could pick me up and send me to dive school, and that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
Yeah. So the boot camp thing.
Second miracle.
Totally. So
I
the
didn't
boot
know how
camp.
religious this was going to be.
The boot camp thing for me was so focused on just how do I become a Navy diver. So that was, to answer your question, that was on my mind every single day throughout the whole entire thing. And then when they say you can't, I'm like, what am I doing here? I want to go home. And then, okay, I can. And
I mean, a lot of people have really bad stories about that kind of weird thing that happens to people in every service, right? They go in for one thing, they get shuffled around, all of a sudden they're doing something else, and they're trying to get somebody, they're petitioning people, and they're saying, "Sorry, it is what it is," and all that. You know my story. I mean, I ended up getting
sent to the wrong A school.
I go to the right A school, and I end up going through Operations Specialist A school, which is radar and air traffic control in Great Lakes, and graduated number 1 in my class. I get to pick my order, so I pick a ship, the USS Albany, which was the flagship in the Mediterranean, 6th Fleet, because I wanted to see the Mediterranean history. And the day that we graduated, they hand me the orders and they read them out loud. Report no later than 07:30 tomorrow morning to underwater demolition SEAL training, Coronado, California. Didn't know where Coronado was. Didn't know what an underwater demolition SEAL thing was. Said, yeah, that's not me. What's your social security number? He said it out loud. That's you. Next! I don't hear your tickets. And I ended up going out there trying to figure out how the Navy screwed that up. So, and then, you show up someplace and they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Because it turns out when I went there 8 years later as an instructor at BUD/S in the first phase, how many people do you think show up, get cold feet, and say, this is a mistake?
Oh.
So
yeah.
I walk in and say, this is a mistake. I'm one of, 20% who show up and get cold feet. So nobody was believing me. It's weird. And you have no leverage. You have no, not a lot of life experience. And the hierarchy, you're usually talking to some snuffy to start with. And you try to claw your way up to somebody who has the authority to maybe help. And then if you get there, they don't care, or they're too busy, or just the way it is. It can be really depressing. It can really be. I mean, a lot of people. Some people actually get out of the military by running away from the military. It gets so depressing and so despondent.
Yeah, saw all that from boot camp, throughout most of my early career. Anyway, I saw all variations of that. Plus, the systems and the tracking and the mentorship and the leadership back then wasn't what it is now.
So, I know you're an expert in leadership and you write about it and you speak on it as a paid speaker. The something I'm always curious about with people, especially being in the military, and I've asked this of other people, it doesn't matter what service they're in. You start off as somebody without a leadership responsibility. You're a follower, you're a snuffy, as they would call. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're a victim of leadership, right? You're a benefactor of good leadership, and you're a victim of poor leadership.
For sure. Yeah.
And do you remember if you were consciously aware of that, or was it just kind of the environment? And if you were aware of it, what kind of insights were you taking from that before you got into a position where you actually were a leader, even if it was of one other person?
Yeah. Well, so I wasn't consciously aware of it. The way I am today, but I think that it's kind of what you said. Back then, you're just a number. You're just a body that somebody's got to deal with. Nobody cared if I went to Navy dive school except for me. Certainly nobody in that immediate circle. And now with mentorship and with contracts and with this legacy of special operators, our sons and our daughters go and do similar things, and so there's just a community now on active duty and not on active duty that didn't exist back then. So yeah, it was a challenge. Nobody was going to send me to Navy dive school except me and that detailer, Master Diver Kaneen, by the way. So God rest his soul, but I'm still thankful to him for giving me the guidance he gave me and then giving me the orders he gave me to go to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii for second class dive school.
So what were some of the early lessons that you learned when you were, I don't know what rank you might have been when you were finally in charge of somebody or something.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, it's an administrative thing, like being a dive soup. You're not necessarily the boss of everybody there.
Yeah.
From an org structure, but you are the boss of that event.
Yeah, that operation. Yeah. So, early on, probably my first duty station after dive school was Naval Medical Research Institute. So it was an experimental diving unit, essentially. And myself and another guy who was my peer, we went to school together, everything, we both got assigned there. We're both young, new fathers, young, 19, and we both got married, both had kids. So either I was in charge of him or he was in charge of me, depending on what was going on. And it really wasn't until probably after I went to first class dive school. So my progression was 2 Charlie, second class diver, then I went first class diver, then I went to EOD school. And it was probably when I was a first class diver is when, leadership hit me front and center. Like I knew I was responsible. By this time I had been to a few leadership courses. The military is very deliberate in leadership development at certain points in your career. And I'll remember Billy K-Bar, Bill Kelber is his name, we call him K-Bar, but I remember him as my leader, him as my LPO, and I thought, holy cow, this guy has got his act together. He's got checklists, and he communicates well, and he's mission driven. So, probably 3 years into my military career is when I learned how to spell the word leadership anyway.
Okay. Yeah, the SEALs, they kind of pride themselves on teaching everybody to lead from a tactical sense. The idea is, and the Army has the same thing, the commander's intent thing, The general gets killed, the colonel knows the plan. The colonel gets killed, the major knows the plan, all the way down to the private. Everybody knows what the plan is and what the objective is. So from that point of view, everybody's got responsibility if they find themselves as the senior person in the moment. And administratively, though, there was pretty much zero training when I was going through my early years in SEALs. It was all observation and avoidance and emulation, right? You had a bad leader, or you saw a bad leader act a certain bad way in public, or you heard about it from other people, your peers, and you registered in the back of your mind, I don't ever want to be like that guy.
For sure.
Or you saw the guys that everybody gravitated to.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of, especially in the small elite units, there's a lot of weight put on respect. Because everybody's technically kind of equal. Just like any place else, there's an A technical capable person and a C, but they're all capable. C is good. It's like if you graduate from med school with a C,
they call you a doctor.
They call you a doctor. Well, it's the same thing with this, right? But then there were other people that were very, very good at, I guess, the judgment calls and the communication styles. I didn't see any communication styles that really mattered as much as the judgment. There were some people that were very mean, but made really good decisions and were really, you respect them because they were honest and they were candid and they were good at the calls they made. You didn't need them to hold your hand. You didn't need to have candy, when they were telling you something was wrong.
Yeah, right.
And then there was others that were very eloquent and all that and had the same thing. So I think that observation matured over time, and I noticed other people said, well, if it's a callous, coarse delivery, regardless of the value of their decision-making capabilities, that's bad. Well, in a combat unit, you're not really looking for somebody who's going to, get an Emmy. You're looking for people that are decisive and have that ability to make a decision and weigh everything, and also listen to people, listen to input from people, which even the coarse ones would ask those questions. They'd ask the questions, they'd listen, they wouldn't pat you on the back for the answers, and they'd take it in with all the other information and experience that they had. And I remember, not very specific moments, but I remember in general being aware, probably 4 years in, there was a separation. Whether they're officers or enlisted, it didn't matter. And then I started becoming a leader. So I'm like, okay, which one do I want to be like? Do I want to be like the quiet, mean guy, but he's really squared away, or do I want to be like the essentially the politician?
Yeah, the charismatic communicator,
who's really, but also makes good decisions. Or I don't want to be like those guys. I mean, did you see people that you that you used as bad examples? Because that's also very educational, right? And were there any particular people that you saw as, even if they weren't your direct mentors, that you emulated? You said, that's what I want to be like, look like, sound like.
There's no doubt about it. I think in everybody's leadership journey, if you became a good leader and you advanced your ability to lead people, that happened in your past. You had, and it starts in our childhood. Your coaches and your teachers, your parents. There's things that happen in our childhood and in our military career where we say, I want to be like that person, or I will never be like that person. And both of those are great tools that people can use to develop their own leadership brand, their own way of doing things. But without a doubt, I mentioned Billy K-Bar, and I just thought, wow, I want to lead the way he leads. I want to be like him. And, you know, when that happens, then there's a respect and there's a commitment. You know, rather than being compliant and doing what you're told, there's a commitment to do a great job and really, really get in alignment with that leader. And then there's two in particular I remember from my military career, and I won't name them, but it was terrible. I almost got out of the Navy because of one of them. And this is after I'm a first-class diver. I'm a mixed gas diver. I'm in charge of diving operations to 300 feet. And this one master diver just had no people skills. He was a screamer. He yelled all the time, cussed you out for anything and everything. And you know, there's a fun factor, right, in being in special operations. Or in other aspects of life, and when people just suck the fun right out of it, you know, who's going to stick around for that? So.
Yeah, oddly enough, it is an element to whether you want to stay or not stay, because again, it's the respect thing, and the relationships are not the same as relationships in the civilian world. They're structured differently, but respect's a big thing. Humor's a big thing. If you can't express your humor, and if you can't respect the people that are calling the shots, you start getting a little antsy and a little edgy, and like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So you went into EOD, and you know, instead of trying to salvage things, now you're trying to blow things up. And I happen to know, even if the audience doesn't know, being an EOD bomb tech is a highly technical. You have to be really smart. Really smart. I mean, the fact you got put in advanced electronics early on. My brother was a submarine advanced electronics guy. And my brother's a really, really smart guy. So you have to have a brain that's wired that way. And so I could see that makes perfect sense that you'd be really, really a fit for EOD. Anything in the training process, the training experience as you're going through EOD, that you can point to now that you think is still kind of crafting the way you look at leadership or the way you look at organizational structure and management?
So many lessons that come out of that, right down to training. First I'll say this. When I was in EOD school, well, let me back up. When I was a first-class diver, my source rating in the Navy, the rank that I wore was for being an electrician's mate. So I went to this electrician's mate sea school at Great Lakes. I'm already a diver, but I'm back at Great Lakes doing this electrician school. And it was electronics, basically. So impedance, capacitance, mutual induction. And I remember there was this mega table, and you had to go through and do the math and solve for these 39 different electrical terms. And I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to do this. And I passed that test. I mean, the criteria to pass is ACE. You had to get everyone right. If you get one little number wrong here, then the other 38 are going to be wrong.
Right.
So I passed that, and I was like, holy cow, that was a boost of confidence for me. Academically, it's like, I can't believe I passed that. But very diligent study, great teammates, you know, and the way we got together and studied morning, noon, and night was really what made me understand and apply the concepts. Took that into EOD school, because EOD school, and I'm sure you've heard and you know, it's a tough academic curriculum.
Right. And
it's a year long. And, you know, it's a year long of basically 10 to 12 hours a day. And, again, great teammates, great instructors, and really that's where it starts with EOD, is that instructor cadre. And, you know, course proctors, right? So one of the instructor cadre is assigned to your class, and his job is carrying and feeding and making sure everybody has what they need, and dropping the hammer if the hammer needs to be dropped, you know, do normal PT, but then do extra PT if you have to. And so I remember those people in particular. And I remember in EOD school, there's a similar problem in the nuclear theory portion of school, because nuclear weapons are part of the EOD mission set. This really complex nuclear equation was the test for the day. And I thought back to that experience at Great Lakes in that electronics course, and that kind of gave me confidence. And then the preparation, the extra study, the effort that went into it. You know, you go into events like that with technical knowledge that you either have or you don't, but then a mindset that says, I'm going to nail this thing, or this thing's going to nail me.
Right.
And at some point, you decide you're going to nail everything, you know, and that's kind of the operator confidence. Some people call it overconfidence. I think you made a great reference to it in one of your books, if I recall correctly, but we're confident, not cocky confident, but almost. And, you know, if there's 4 EOD techs all looking at a problem, everybody has a different idea, and everybody's idea is the best idea, you know, and so that kind of thought process, but there's risk analysis, mission analysis, you know, all those things come together, or they came together at that point in EOD school. And then you're working with your teammates, and in an EOD school, things are monitored with live explosives, similar to BUDS. So if you made a mistake disarming an explosive, there's a loud boom that gets everybody's attention.
Yeah.
And so you literally have that pressure, that added pressure or that added pressure looming as you're analyzing, disarming.
You got the dreaded safety violation. You know, everything you're doing is a potential safety violation.
Everything.
And depending on how big the infraction is, it could be you're out, you're done, or one more like that, you're out, you're done.
That's
and so
right.
you're kind of, were you a jump master?
Not military now.
Yeah. So I went to the Army's, these called accelerated free fall.
Yeah.
And the JPI is the jump master inspection. You have to inspect 3 people. So there's a slick jumper, static line. There's a jumper full equipment, including the gun bag and everything. And then there's a jumper, in our case, it was a water jumper. You were only allowed 3 minors. If you had more than 3 minor failures, and there was a time limit on it.
Yeah.
We would sit there and practice on each other and get it absolutely 100% right, 0 errors. You get a major, you're done, right? And then 3 days later, we go in there and we get a major and 2 minors. And then we come back and we get 0 errors. And we come back and we would get like 4 minors. And we had no sense that we were in control of anything. It was like, wait a minute, how did I screw that up? I did it right 5 times. How could so that we were always like, there's this boogeyman, because everything was so safety focused, and to pass, you had to cover 30 different elements and not make a mistake from a safety point of view. It was terrifying. It was worse than anything I'd ever gone through.
Wow. So when I was going through the chemical warfare, chem bio warfare phase at EOD school, one of the things we do is a reconnaissance, right? Either a long range or a close-in reconnaissance. So you walk right up to that piece of ordnance and you identify it. So you look for markings either on the ordnance itself or on the fuse, and when you identify that stuff, you write it down, you record it somehow, and then you take it back and we have what are called publications, EOD pubs, and you identify that specific piece of ordnance, and then that will tell you how to disarm it. If you're going to blow it in place, we call it BIP, BIP. If you're going to blow it in place, how to do that. Or if you're going to remove the fuse, how to do that. So as I'm writing down the information, one of the numbers in the nomenclature was the number 5. So I wrote the number 5. Now keep in mind, this is in Northwest Florida in the summertime, right? So beads of sweat are rolling off my body as I'm doing this. Well, took my paperwork back and gave it to the instructor so I could go on to the next phase, and he failed me. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you wrote down the number wrong. He says, you have 3 and the number should have been 5. And I was like, how can I write that down wrong? And I looked closely at it, and you could see where a bead of sweat came off my head and landed right on that pencil mark, because it was pencil. And
changed to 5 to a 3.
It smeared that 5 just enough to make it look like a 3. And we had that conversation. He looked at it again, and he's like, oh, yeah, I see that. Okay, continue.
Oh, it's nuts. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions about combat. The first one's about the EOD side, and the second one's about leadership. So tell me a story where you had to do this for real in a combat environment. You know, where you see, you know, the training is one thing, and at least in the SEAL teams, we would train like we were going to fight Superman and Godzilla.
Yeah.
So when we actually got into combat for the first time, it seemed almost diminished. Like we weren't up against Tyson. We weren't boxing. It was like we were fighting people that were JV. You know,
Yeah.
JV. The problems weren't as complex. The scenarios weren't as complex. And then sometimes we'd question, why did they train us that way back then? Why was there so much complexity and so much...
So there's a lot of scenarios I can give, but really the overall gist is we have so many rules and so many regulations and so many safeties that we pay attention to in training. But in combat, I hate to say it, a lot of times you don't have time for that. We'll use our textbook TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Been a little while. We'll use them when we can, but if bullets are flying or you know something, there's AMRAAMs and there's ordnance flying through the air, then you don't have time to do everything, quote unquote, by the book. Yeah. So, and I'll say this, like, so I was on a Army Special Forces team, and IEDs we were in right there where
you're embedded with them.
I was embedded, yeah, for my whole deployment, and we were in southern Iraq where all the ordnance was coming across from Iran into Iraq. So we would get this stuff in various phases of assembly, some full up rounds, most of them not armed but fully assembled, and most of the time we want to gather this stuff for intelligence. We want to be able to understand exactly what we're dealing with and then develop countermeasures for it. But a lot of stuff we had already seen and we knew what it was, and we had to do mass demolition to get rid of this stuff. So we would literally build a stockpile somewhere, and then when that stockpile got so full, we would drive down one of the highways and find some desert on the side of the highway and go out there with 11,000, 12,000, 20,000 pounds of captured enemy ordnance and put another 2,000 pounds of C4,
and bip the hell out of it,
and blow in place and bip the living hell out of it. Well, and we needed a lot of our explosives to do that. So we had this stockpile that was building, and we knew that there was going to be a big engagement, and we were going to have a lot more, and we needed to get rid of this stuff. And I didn't have enough C4 to get rid of this stuff, so we called in, made the call. Helicopter showed up 30 minutes later, and they literally kicked 200 pounds of C4 in a crate off the side of that helicopter, and they said, have fun, and they got out of there. So and we were safe, obviously, and everything's here, but in that war zone, when you're not in a war zone, there's always somebody above you in the chain of command who's going to make the decision or help you make the decision. Right. In the war zone, and I was a lieutenant when I was there, but the most junior people have that decision authority. You're making significant decisions. I was the principal counter IED advisor to the task force commander for the Siege of SOTF, and I was the EOD guy on the team. And when the Siege of SOTF commander is asking how we should handle a situation, I've got nobody to check it with. I got to give him a rock solid plan of attack, based, and he's counting on me for it. Right. So those were like the major differences. Like, it's real, and you want to minimize risk, but you have to accept a higher level of risk, and what you ride on is your discipline, it's training, like you said,
judgment. Train
like you're getting, like you're fighting Superman, and that's in special operations. That's just the way things go.
So you start to segue a little bit into the leadership with the absence of all the nannies.
Yeah, a good way to put it.
So a similar experience. I'm a lieutenant, junior grade, although I was an E7, almost an E8 when I became an officer as a SEAL. So I was given a platoon. Normally it would be given to a mid-grade senior lieutenant. And I show up in theater, and this is back before they had big task forces and task groups where they were putting sending SEALs, COs overseas to
Mhm.
combat and all that. And I walked in the room, and all the Army, all the joint counterparts looked at me and, what do you want to do? What do you need? And I'm thinking, I wasn't trained for this. Nobody's trained a Lieutenant JG to answer those questions. There's always somebody else who's answering those questions.
Mhm.
The logistics of setting up the entire mission. I never touched the logistics of going in to do a mission. That was done by somebody else, like where are the bullets coming from? Where's the intel coming from? And that was a real shock to me. And so I end up doing 36 missions. I come back, and they're trying to put some lessons learned together, and the Admiral staff brought me up there, and I'm sitting there, and they said, what did you feel was a shortfall? Like, what do you think we should be training our officers to do? I said, well, be in command. You're not training Lieutenant JGs and lieutenants to command, because if you stick these guys out in the middle of nowhere, embedded, I mean, whether you're embedded as a specialist like you were, or you're embedded like Jocko Willowink was, where he's inside of a big Army operation, or other guys that were put into Marine units in Najaf and Kandahar, not Kandahar,
Ramadi?
Fallujah,
Ramadi.
You know, so you got SEALs in with Marines, SEALs in with Army guys. You got an EOD bomb disposal tech in with Special Forces, Green Berets. And they look at you, and there's no org chart over your head. You got to start making a call. And that's what I told them. I said, you need to start training these guys for that situation, because I wasn't prepared for that. I was technically very, very prepared, because I was in an ex-enlisted, but most officers don't have 10, 11 years of being a SEAL before they become an officer.
Right. That's a huge benefit, by the way. I had all that enlisted time.
Yeah.
That
It helps with the judgment thing for sure,
Yeah,
and your
yeah.
bullshit meters really
Yep.
fine-tuned. So whether it's people or situations. So on the leadership side, did you have any, other than the one you just mentioned of kind of, hey, I'm it, did you have any other like epiphanies about leadership, your own personal leadership, your leadership style, leadership in those kinds of, combat's essentially a high stress continuum.
Yeah.
Even if you're not on target, you're recovering from being on target, or recovering from being on target 10 times in a row. So it's a whole different kind of ball of wax when it comes to the way your brain works.
The epiphany is, and I couldn't tell you exactly when it happened. It probably because it was a combination of things. But at some point, you're making decisions in pursuit of the greater good, and if you deviate from that, you gotta put yourself in timeout. You gotta step back and say, am I doing the right thing here? I talk about something called metacognition, right? Thinking about thinking, and is my thinking process sound? And am I trying to achieve the mission that I've been assigned, or am I trying to achieve what I think is the right outcome here? And so at some point, that becomes routine, but not paralysis by analysis. At some point, you become responsible, you become efficient, proficient, you become good at being a leader. And that doesn't mean because you know everything and you're making all these wonderful decisions. It's because you have surrounded yourself by a great team. You know the strengths and weaknesses of everybody on your team, including your own, and you leverage those strengths, and you support the weak areas, whether it's you providing support to somebody else, or you going to your team and saying, hey guys, this is not my area of expertise, I'm going to need some help here. So those things happened along the way, and there is one epiphany I'll mention briefly, and I write about it extensively in the book, but not in the war zone. When I was an instructor at Navy Dive School, I did something that was in direct violation of the commanding officer's directive, and that was an opportunity for my career to come to an end. But what that commanding officer did was evaluated the situation, and he said, okay, Pizzini made a bad decision today, but that's not Pizzini's character. So I'm going to put Pizzini on a path to recovery as long as he owns the mistake that he made. And that's what happened. I've seen other people who have made a similar mistake, their careers ended. And that's because their reputation was more egocentric or ego-driven. And but why are some people forgiven for a mistake and other people are fired?
Well, owning it, right?
Step one.
Personal accountability means you're redeemable
Yeah,
as a professional, right?
yeah.
I mean, if you don't have personal responsibility, then why would I want you in a
You're not going to last.
high-speed, low-drag unit?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's part of our basic. That's part of like when you go to BUDS, we go to EOD school. They try and filter that stuff out. I mean, but those schools that we go to, our training, it's as much about that as it is developing the tactical and technical skills.
Right. Well, I've read your book. I think everybody should read your book. I haven't been through your course yet, but I've heard lots of great things from people that have. And a lot of what you've talked about is incorporated in your thought process and what you what you convey to the students, which are mostly either business leaders, in some cases they're civic leaders, at lots of different levels, founders, people that are working as management leaders in different organizations. But I'd love to have you back on Instinct so we can talk almost completely exclusively about leadership in business and the dynamics of leadership in business, communications in business, decision making, judgment, all these things we're talking about, because what you can do in the military and with the people that you have working for you in the military, you just talked about, the resources you have, the quality of the people that you have. It doesn't always work out the same way in the commercial world.
Yeah, different dynamic for sure.
Bob, man, it's been great. Thank
Marty,
you very much.
Thanks.
Love having you.
Happy to come back.
So thanks for watching Instincts. If you want to know more about us, go to podfinitynation.net. Also, you can give us your comments, recommendations, or ideas of either guests or subject matter by sending an email to podfinitynation@gmail.com.